Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear us all right? It's so great to be here. Hasn't this been a wonderful conference? Just been so fabulous. We have been to a lot of conferences in, I would say, the 20 years since I started teaching raw foods, and I don't believe I have ever attended one with so much variety. And also, I must say, when I say variety, I mean the whole spectrum of health, not just about food, but the whole spectrum, all the different kinds of things that are affecting our health. And as Stephen said, what we want to do today is to talk about not what's causing our health challenges, but how we can get healthy and how we can live this lifestyle on a daily basis. Not because we're sick, but because we want to achieve optimal health. We want to have a level of energy and vitality that maybe we've never even known could be experienced. And that can happen to each one of us. We can each actually grow younger and more vital as we accumulate the years ahead. I don't want to say as we age, but of course we're all aging, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. In fact, what we'd like to do in the next 90 minutes is we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and our story, because I think that you can relate to us a little bit better if you understand where we're coming from. Also, we want to talk about what we have learned are the kinds of foods that you want to incorporate in your daily life, and what foods to remove. Because it's not just about what you eat, it's about what you don't eat, as other people have said this weekend. And also, because we don't eat 100% raw food 100% of the time, we want to talk about what are some good choices of cooked foods and cooking methods, because it's not just the cooked foods that you eat, but it's also how long they're cooked and how they're cooked, so that they don't do damage. So you can include some cooked foods in your diet, some warming foods in the winter if you choose, but that won't be doing your body harm. And then we'd like to talk about, if we have enough time, talk about some other lifestyle choices that can add to your longevity and your energy. I'm going to let my husband, Dan Ladermann, go ahead and get started, maybe telling you a little bit about his story, and we'll just bounce it back and forth.
Good afternoon. It's such an honor to be here and be among such a distinguished group of presenters. My story is I grew up in Ohio, meat and potatoes territory, so that was what I knew of food. We didn't have a lot of fresh greens, and luckily I escaped after I got out of college. I was an electrical engineer, went to Maryland for 3 years, got a master's in computer science, and then ended up in California in Silicon Valley, where I was involved as an early pioneer in both Unix and the internet and the technology world. And I had what I thought was a really great life. I had the fancy red sports car. I had a nice house in Los Altos, California. I was eating great food, drinking great wine, gaining great weight, gaining great levels of cholesterol. I was about 40 pounds heavier. Cholesterol was over 200. And I did that for 40 plus years. And then one day I had my wife at the time, a different one, I had to practice before I got it right, heard about this talk that was going to be done about raw food, and it was at this interesting place. It was put on by a group called The Spirit Has a Plan, and I guess they did, but we were so out of touch, we went to this raw food talk and we brought barbecued chicken wings. But Spirit had a plan. We listened to this talk on raw food, and for those of you, since many of you are from New York, David Jubb was the speaker at the time. But he talked about the animals and the anatomy and physiology of the body and how raw food worked, and he played a little music, and there was just something that just kind of clicked. And the next day, I quit eating meat. I had to get rid of my Weber barbecue and trade it in for a Vitamix. And it turned out to be really good. And I spent a couple years, kind of transitioning into the raw food lifestyle with being vegetarian. As I mentioned in the panel the first night, it took a little longer to let go of fish from my diet. But
And you mentioned sugar, too.
And sugar. Sugar is still that's kind of an ongoing one, more than the fish is. But I love sugar and sweets. Luckily, we have a great culinary program. But now I know it only takes a little bit and on occasion. But what I found was after 40 years, I looked around and as I said, I had an extra 40 pounds. I had chronic back problems. I had allergies that I had all along. The Sprout Man talked about allergies that he had as a kid. The only valuable thing I got out of allergies is it got me a deferment from the draft. But I'd rather have not had the allergies. But once I went raw, most of the allergies went away. And then later, when we went gluten-free, the rest of them went away. So it's really been a progress. And after being on raw foods for a number of years, I was at an event in San Francisco, one of the very, very first raw food expos, and Cherie had a booth and was handing out cheese, and Viktoras Kovinskis had a booth, and he told me about a program going on at Hippocrates called the Health Educator Program, and he said, you ought to go there. And at the time, I was between jobs in Silicon Valley. One of the companies I'd worked for 14 years had gotten sold. So I was taking some time off. So I said, well, okay, I'll go to Hippocrates. And what I saw was, as you've heard this weekend, just amazing things that happen when people are fed the right food and the bad foods are removed and they go through some exercise and some psychological, adjustments. And it really was amazing. And what I decided at the time, that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to teach people about health and vitality and what was available on a healthy diet. So I went back to Silicon Valley, got out of the high technology business until we started a company with 40 employees, and now we got lots of technology. But I started a nonprofit where we started bringing called the Institute for Vibrant Living, and we were bringing in speakers from all over the world. We brought Viktoras Kovinskis and Brian Clement and Gabriel Cousins and Doug Graham and people with all sorts of different methods of teaching about raw foods. And it was really quite amazing. One of the events was a fundraising dinner where Living Light came down and Cherie taught a class on healthy holiday cooking and made a fundraising dinner, and it was really great. And that's where I got to meet Cherie for the first time and realized not only was she beautiful, her food was beautiful, and all of the people that surrounded Living Light were in the light. And I decided that over time, when I got to know Cherie, that was a group that I wanted to be involved in. So I worked my way into Living Light and into Cherie's heart. So it took a while. I had to go through my own transformations also, as I was, after 40 years, it doesn't just happen automatically overnight. You can get some immediate changes right away. Like we've heard, it's things like I didn't have diabetes, but weight loss, weight just changed. While I was at Hippocrates, I watched my cholesterol, which before I went raw was over 200. The first time I was checked at Hippocrates, it was 150 some, and before I left the program, it was 113. So just amazing. You can't do that on drugs. Drugs get you little tiny changes. So it's been an amazing transformation. I've lost the weight. My chronic back problems have gone away. I feel stronger, more energetic than ever. And every year it just keeps getting better. So part of what we want to do today is help get across that this is really easy. How many of you feel motivated after this weekend to make some changes? How many of them are concerned about how are you going to do that? Well, good. We're going to help you with that. And Cherie, you want to tell them a little bit about your story?
Yeah, people often ask me how I got started on this, and when people always ask me my age, I'm 66, for those of you who didn't hear me say that before. Thank you. And I can tell you, the older you get, the bigger the payoff when it comes to taking care of yourself. Because it's easy to look good when you're 50 if you're, kind of like getting some exercise and so forth. But when you pass that 60 threshold, that's when people really sit up and take notice, and you can really be an inspiration to people. So when people look at me, they think, well, she must have good genes. But I'm here to tell you that that's not true. Having good genes and looking good in genes are two different things. So I do not have good genes. and I'll tell you a little bit about my family history. My mother died when I was 4. She was 22. I never knew my grandmother, who died of heart disease before I was born. My grandfather died of cancer when he was in his 50s. My sister died of kidney failure when she was 10 and I was 12. My favorite cousin died of diabetes after they started cutting off his limbs in a desperate attempt to save his life. I think of all the death that I saw in my family at a young age, that's what scared me the most, was having the limbs removed. That was frightening. I was so afraid that this was going to happen to me. Diabetes, obesity, hard to believe, but my other sisters in my family are obese. In fact, my sister, who is 8 years younger than I am, who wouldn't listen all of our adult life, wouldn't give my lifestyle any kind of credence, because she was on her own path, and you can only push so much before they push you away. And I had to learn this the hard way. Really, it's much better to be an inspiration than it is to be a missionary when it comes to your own family. Really true, not to preach. But finally, a few years ago, when my dad was dying of cancer, she came to Costa Rica, where we have a little place. She came for the holidays, and she couldn't even come close to keeping up with our lifestyle. She couldn't walk on the beach with us. She couldn't go hiking with us. She was very obese. But because she was in our world, she was eating what we ate. And she wanted to exercise, so she'd do a little bit, and then she'd sit while we finished, and we'd come back and pick her up. But every day she did a little bit more. And while she was there, in the almost 2 weeks that we were there together, she lost 30 pounds. And every morning she felt better and better and better. Now, my sister was on a lot of medication, as you can imagine, even though 8 years younger than I am, because she was obese. I don't know how many different meds she was taking. She would have been too embarrassed to tell me. But she had a big bag with her. So anyway, she went home to her life in Dallas, Texas, and Marie Callender pies and all the kind of stuff that, got her into trouble in the first place. And she gained her weight back. And so she called me at home. Our school is in California. She called and said, I want to come out for that 21-day program you were telling me about. You've heard that a lot of us have 21-day programs, and that's because it's been proven that it takes 21 days to change a habit. More than that, even better, but in 21 days you can change a habit. So she came out for the 21-day program, and she lost weight again. She learned how to make great tasting food, the kind of food that she ate with us when we were in Costa Rica, that she never felt deprived about eating. Every day she looked forward to the meals, always wondering, what are we having today? And so she learned how to do this in the 21 days that we were there, gained a lot of confidence in the kitchen, learned how to make all these great foods. And when she first got there, though, people knew that we were related because we had the same last name, but everybody thought she was my mother. 8 years younger than I am. And that, I think, is what really made her stay on the straight and narrow. She did not want people to think that, and she would tell them, and I am not Cherie's mother. When we were introduced, she would just right off the bat tell people that. So anyway, it's been 2 years. She came back to Costa Rica with us again this winter, and when she stepped off of the plane, nobody recognized her because she had lost over 100 pounds. Yeah, that's how obese she was. And she still has 30 pounds to lose, but it's coming off. It's coming off. She had reached a little bit of a plateau because she really wasn't exercising enough. So when she came to Costa Rica and she started exercising more with us, she lost another 10 pounds, and now she is really excited. She's joined the gym, she got some exercise shoes, and she's really on it. Her life has changed so much in this last 2 years. She has the first boyfriend she's had in 25 years. And he adores her. He just thinks she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And it's because she knows now that she's worth it. She was filled with loathing. She really didn't even want to live. And she just kept eating more just because she didn't know what else to do with herself. And everything has changed now. You don't have to need to lose 100 pounds, though, to make a change. You don't have to be sick. You don't have to have a major health crisis. You just have to want to be as healthy and vital as you possibly can be. And when you are, you're more productive, you're happier with everything in your life. You may even decide to quit that job that you don't like and take on a career that really fills you with love and fulfillment. And that's one of the things that we do at Living Light, is we help people to make career choices that supports them in their health choices and at the same time helps them to help others. And there is nothing more fulfilling than that. But let me get back to my story. So as a youngster, I wanted to make these changes in my own life, but everybody thought that I couldn't really change. I couldn't become a vegetarian. You know, in those days, people thought you'd die if you quit eating meat. And even though I read some kind of obscure books that led me to believe that health and diet might be related, none of my parents or my relatives wanted to think that that was so. And so I was forced to sit at the dinner table and eat my full dinner until late at night. If I didn't eat, then I didn't get to go to bed. You know, those were the days when kids didn't get to decide what it was they wanted to eat, or when they wanted to eat. So anyway, when I graduated from high school, but let me just back up a little bit. When I was 12 years old, I won my first cooking contest. So I was always a talented chef, or at least I thought I was. And I love to please people with food. In fact, that first cooking contest, I won with cookies. And, you know, I probably made cookies for people for 45 years after that because people really like you if you make good cookies. And I liked being popular, so I thought that was a pretty good path. But anyway, so when I graduated from high school and I went out on my own, that was when I was able to change my diet. And I really didn't think that I was sick, but what I found is that I stopped getting all of those kinds of respiratory problems that I grew up with. Anytime anything went around, the flu, colds, mononucleosis, whatever it was, I got it. And I missed a lot of school when I was a kid. And so when I changed my diet, and first it was as a vegetarian, I did notice a big difference in my health. And I was still eating dairy products, but still I noticed a big difference in my health. And I started teaching other people how to eat the way I like to eat because I wanted to meet other people who were interested in eating my kind of food. And it wasn't that hard to find people who wanted to get healthy. And right from the beginning, when I was in my 20s, I had a lot of people in my classes. I was teaching through my home and pretty soon I started teaching through universities, through extended adult education programs and that sort of thing. And I continued to read. I was just a voracious reader. I wanted to know everything that I could about health. And so, of course, as I found out, as I learned more and more, I changed my style of food preparation. So I went from everything fried vegetarian to things that were more steamed and not as fatty. And then I became a vegan, mostly because of the concern for animals at that point. I really didn't think that it would make a big difference in my health. And yet it did, definitely did. I felt more energetic when I cut out dairy products. And then I started reading about Viktoras Kulvinskas in the 80s. I read his book. I thought he was like from another planet or something. Actually, he's a good friend of mine and a mentor, and I still think he's from another planet.
He admits he's from another planet.
He says he is. But anyway, I learned a tremendous amount from him, and I started reading about Dr. Ann Wigmore and the amazing healing that she was doing in Boston and Puerto Rico. So I went to Puerto Rico because I wanted to spend some time with her, and I wanted to see what she was doing there. And as Dan said, happened at Hippocrates. It was absolutely miraculous. I saw people coming in stretchers and leaving on their own volition, being able to walk up and down the stairs, walk up and down the beach when they couldn't even take a step before. I saw people who came and they had to put their affairs in order. Their doctors told them there was nothing more that could be done. And then they left with the doctor's report that their cancer was in remission. It was so amazing to me. And at that time, I had been teaching vegetarian culinary arts for nearly 20 years. And I swore to Dr. Ann Wigmore that I would never teach another cooking class again, that I would make it my goal to create a cuisine that would not only nurture or nourish the body, but would also nurture the spirit. Because let's face it, we are sentient beings, and food is such a big part of our social lives. And what I was seeing is that people were coming to her clinic, to the Ann Wigmore Institute, and they were getting well. But then they were going home, and they didn't, they couldn't just live on the sprouts and the wheatgrass and the energy soup. Maybe they could, but most of them didn't, and they went back to their old ways, and they had to return again because they were getting sick again. So we saw a lot of people who were coming back. And I just felt that if we could make the food taste good, if we could create the flavors and the textures and the look of foods that were familiar to people, the kind of foods that satisfies people, then people could stay on a healthy food program once they became well. Clearly, when they were sick, they had to go to extreme measures to get well. But once they were well, they could start bringing some of the flavorful foods back again. And so I went home. I told Dr. Ann that I was not going to teach cooking anymore. And she said to me, "You will be a beacon of light for my teachings." And at the time, I didn't know if she told everyone that. But I took her at her word, and I decided that I was going to start teaching only raw foods. Then a couple of years later, after I wrote my book, Angel Foods, Healthy Recipes for Heavenly Bodies, which, by the way, that's this book right here. People have been asking me about it. When I wrote this book, it was 100% raw. And I sent it out to a lot of publishers, and no publisher had any interest in it at all. They said, first of all, she doesn't know whether it's a spiritual book or a recipe book. And I thought, how do you separate the two? To me, it's all the same. But they also said that nobody wants raw food. And indeed, there were no raw food recipe books at that time. But what I had found was when I started teaching people how to make delicious raw foods that mimicked the comfort foods they were used to eating, like pasta and lasagna and pizza and enchiladas and tamales and all those foods that we come to love, when I was able to create those foods using different kinds of foods, different kinds of textures, different kinds of machinery to create those textures and so forth, people loved them. People really did. It didn't matter whether they were meat eaters, whether they cared whether they were healthy or not. They liked the food, and that's what my goal was to make this food as delicious as anything they'd ever had. In fact, in some ways, it has to be better. It has to be better because if it's just as good as, they're going to reach for and they're not really motivated to be healthy, they're going to reach for whatever, they reach for. They don't care. But if it's even better, if it's even more flavorful and more refreshing, then they'll reach for the raw food. So anyway, I went home and I created this new cuisine called gourmet, raw vegan cuisine, and I started teaching people, and I had a pretty widespread audience by that time because I was teaching through international vegetarian organizations, some of the same organizations where I have gotten to know some of our speakers here today. And people were really receptive to it right away because everybody wants to be healthy and everybody wants to eat well. And to be able to combine the two, really worked out. But I met Viktoras Kulvinskas shortly after I wrote my book, Angel Foods, and he asked me if I would cater an event at a retreat of his in Arkansas, which I did. And afterwards, it was an 8-day retreat, and afterwards he sat me down. He said, "You really must train chefs. Chefs all over the world should know how to make this food. People should be able to go into a restaurant and have the option of eating this food." And I looked up to Viktoras I really never had an intention of opening a restaurant or opening a cafe, opening a school or anything like that. But I so looked up to him that within 2 weeks I started Living Light Culinary Institute. And I told my best friend that I was starting this institute, and she said, "You're one person, how can you call it an institute?" And I said, "I'll grow into it." And indeed, it's been, actually I started Living Light 16 years ago. And we are, by the way, we're the only culinary school in the world, that's a licensed culinary school in the world that's all raw vegan. We're all organic, we're gluten-free, and of course kosher, because, we would be that too. And people come to our school from 60 different countries. This is a worldwide revolution. And if the food tastes good, people will eat it. We were in Fiji, and our guide there said, "Oh yeah, raw food. My aunt told me I should get into that." In Fiji. We were in Cusco, Peru, and there was a raw food restaurant there. We were in Bali. Everywhere we go now, there are raw food restaurants. One of my goals 20 years ago when I started creating this cuisine was that I would be able to travel the world and I would be able to eat raw food everywhere I went. And that has pretty much been the case. In fact, just this year, or last year, when we were promoting our most recent book, Raw Food for Smart, Busy People, right? You're not dummies if you're into raw food, so it must be raw food for smart, busy people. We were promoting that. We were on a worldwide tour, and really everywhere we went, our hosts took us to raw food restaurants and showed us in their local stores, wherever it was. We were in Berlin. We were everywhere. And there were shelves of raw crackers and kale chips and superfoods. And we're going to talk a little bit about superfoods in a minute. Somebody was asking me that the other day. What kind of superfoods do you eat? So anyway, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit about my background. I love helping people to eat foods that make them feel fabulous. And everywhere we go, people come up to us and say, "You might not remember me. I was at the school 10 years ago, but I just wanted to thank you and tell you how much my life has changed." And many times, there were people who came to the school for personal enrichment because they just wanted to learn how to make healthy foods for themselves and their families, but a whole new door opened to them, and they realized that they wanted to share this with others, and they started teaching, or they opened some kind of food service business, or became a personal chef, or some such thing, and they have a whole new life, and so that's really exciting too. But now let's put that away, and let's talk about what foods we've learned over the years support the average person who is not in the middle of a health crisis. So the kinds of foods that you could eat on a daily basis that will really help you to get the fuel that you need, because as far as we're concerned, it's all about fuel. Really, really important to give your body the fuel that it needs to regenerate, to stay young. I'm not afraid of aging. We're all aging. There's no question about it. But you don't have to prematurely age. That's all that's going on with me, is I'm not aging prematurely. Not because I'm special. It's because of my lifestyle. And believe me, if I didn't have 40 employees and I wasn't running 40 businesses and traveling all the time, I would probably look a whole lot better. So you can really get younger and healthier and more vital with every bite you take. And you'll start to notice when you eat, when you give your body the fuel that it needs, that you'll feel so good about yourself, inside and out. Mind, body, and spirit, that when you eat something that doesn't support your health, you'll notice it right away. So it's not about, I can't have that and I really want it. It's more about, oh, I don't want that because I know it's going to make me feel bad. Because we all have addictions, as Brian would say, but I'll tell you what my addiction is. My addiction is feeling good. I am addicted to feeling good. I want to feel good when I wake up. I want to feel good all day long, And I don't want to put something in my mouth that's going to take that away. And that's what happens after a while. And you don't expect it to happen right away. Be patient with yourself. Love yourself and know that you deserve to feel your best. So Dan, I know I've been yakking a lot. It's not unusual, believe me. But let's go ahead and talk about what are the best foods to eat and what foods to stay away from. And if you're going to eat cooked foods, what are the best kinds of foods and what are the best cooking methods?
Yeah, great. One of the things we want to get across today is that eating healthy can be easy. The nice thing about eating, and we're going to talk predominantly it's all plant-based, all gluten-free, organic as possible, because these are the things that are going to provide us the most health. And our goal is to have it as minimally processed, as minimally cooked as possible. Because what we want is food that's high in nutrition. And the main nutrition is phytonutrients. We've heard from many of the doctors about all the amazing properties that are in different foods that fight cancer, fight heart disease, all these things. They're mostly phytonutrients. Phyto is Greek for plant, which means the only place we get them are from plants. We don't get them from meat. You know, the way the cows get their phytonutrients is by eating the grass. But to be healthy, the easiest thing is to eat a full spectrum of food. Eat the different colors of the rainbow. Because what happens is plants are out in the sun, they go through photosynthesis, and one of the byproducts of this is they could get sunburn. Byproduct of photosynthesis is free radicals. Free radicals would basically kill the plant. So one of the things plants developed is phytonutrients that protect them and make them healthy. The good news for us is, because the bad news is we don't create phytonutrients, but plants have an excess of them, or they have all that they need, and when we consume them, we get the phytonutrients. But different plants have different phytonutrients, and it tends to be related to the color of the vegetables. So different color vegetables have different phytonutrients, and there's thousands of these things, but there's some main ones that we typically hear about. So the easy way to make sure we're getting them all that we need is have a full spectrum, which means eating the different colors of the rainbow. So starting out with, things like reds, tomatoes, strawberries, watermelon if you're eating
raspberries.
Fruits. Yeah, anything that's red is going to have a particular spectrum of phytonutrients.
And those of you who aren't eating fruit, another really great red vegetable, it actually is a fruit, but it's not a sweet fruit, and that is red bell peppers. Now, bell peppers is really important to eat colorful bell peppers, not green, because green bell peppers are unripe fruit. And so a lot of people have digestive problems eating bell peppers, but that's because they're eating green. So eat the red. They're really high in vitamin C, which helps to protect you from those free radicals. And free radicals are wayward molecules that attack your healthy cells. This is very aging, and it's very disease-causing. You need to have healthy cells, and so you don't want to be taking in foods that are causing free radicals. And vitamin C is a really important nutrient, so red bell peppers.
Yeah, and the one thing to talk about for phytonutrients before we go on and talk about some of the different colors is the fact that phytonutrients and enzymes and vitamins are all very sensitive to heat. So one of the things that's not in a lot of the research when they talk about eating plant-based diets is what's the impact of cooking. And the reality is cooking, in almost all cases, and we'll talk about a few exceptions, basically destroys all these antioxidants, all these phytonutrients that are really the health-promoting properties. And that's why a raw food diet, where we're not cooking them, is a supercharge. You've seen the research. Most of the research that was shown over the weekend, the stuff that Dr. Greger put up, all had to do with just plant-based in general. But when we eat a raw food diet and a live food diet with sprouts, we're getting supercharged. These are the superfoods. Our plants and our vegetables are our superfoods. You don't have to travel halfway around the world and get goji berries to have superfoods. Kale is a superfood. Blueberries are superfoods. Any of the plant kingdom basically are superfoods. And we get them in maximum nutrition when we eat them as minimally processed, as minimally heated as possible. And by minimally heated, you might hear the numbers are anywhere between 105 to 118 degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature at which these nutrients start becoming destroyed.
And different vegetables and fruits have different heat thresholds. And if you're using something like a dehydrator to dehydrate food, be aware of the fact that if you set your dehydrator at 115, the heat will go on and it will go off. So it spikes and ebbs. That means it goes on and it comes off in an attempt to keep it at 115. And that's why most recipe books will say 105. But if I don't remember to talk about this a little bit later, will somebody please ask me the question about dehydrator, because I don't want to get too off track, and it's kind of easy to do. But I do want to talk about the right way to use a dehydrator, because you can create a lot of bacterial growth or, conversely, cook your food in a dehydrator. And I've worked with Excalibur for a couple of decades in learning how to best use a dehydrator for optimal health. So let's not forget that at the end.
Okay, so we had reds, yellows, yellow bell peppers, fruits, things, nectarines, papaya if you're eating fruits, beets.
Yellow beets, yep.
Anything with yellow color is going to have another
yellow
spectrum.
Squash, sweet potatoes. The yellows and oranges kind of come together. Carrots even could be in that orange category. You've got the carotenoids, and of course your mother probably told you eat your carrots, it's good for your eyes. She's absolutely right. And because of the carotenoids and other phytonutrients and antioxidants that are in that color particularly. And so make sure that you include all of these colors in your diet every day.
And same way with the blues and the purples and the oranges. We had said orange already. But one of the key the base color, and our favorite one is greens. Leafy greens. Dark leafy greens really are a key base. They're going to be full of chlorophyll. They're full of calcium. They're even full of omega-3 fatty acids and essential fatty acids and plenty of protein. Is there anybody that's still worried about protein on a vegetarian diet? Hopefully we all understand that in the United States there isn't a disease name. We got names for all these diseases, even ones that I think are made up, but there's no name for protein deficiency. It just doesn't exist. So
there's eating too much protein in this country.
That's called death.
The wrong kind of protein.
Animal-based protein. But you can eat all of the plant-based protein you want, and there's no problems with it.
Where they have problems with protein deficiency are in countries where people are starving. They're not getting enough food, they're not getting enough calories, and so therefore they're also not getting enough protein.
So the whole concept, if you haven't gotten it yet, about protein and eating animal-based protein is bull, fed to us by the bull industry and the meat industry and the dairy industry, who really want us to keep consuming their products.
And if you are concerned about protein, say you're a bodybuilder and you still have the mindset that you need to have a lot of protein, go for the legumes rather than the nuts. Legumes are a little bit easier to digest for most people than nuts, which are higher in fat. And you can cook them, as one of the things that you could certainly cook would be legumes. And then, you might have a better emotional response to the food because you think you're getting the protein that you need. And over time, you'll find that really you're getting all the protein that you need in a varied plant-based diet, even without the legumes.
Yep. And you mentioned nuts. Nuts are one of the things we find when people start eating a vegetarian or a raw diet is there's a tendency to want more nuts in your diet because we've been so programmed, so used to feeling a little heavier and feeling it takes time for digestion and not feeling so light. One of the things a lot of people have challenges with is they feel ungrounded because they have such an unlimited amount of energy. They feel like, wow, I'm kind of spacey because they've never felt like that before. And once you get used to it, it doesn't feel so ungroundedness, and it just feels like, wow, it's energy. I'm light. I'm not weighted down. I'm not falling asleep after I eat. And So if you have a tendency for nuts, try to watch that a little bit, and don't worry too much about it, because it will dissipate over time.
And
also.
About how much nuts would you say people should eat?
Well, a handful of nuts a couple of times a week, over a period of time. So it's not a lot, but nuts are heart healthy, and we talk about nuts. We want raw nuts, and when we talk about cooked food, I guess we might as well just talk about it. Is roasted nuts are roasted oils, and roasted oils are not good for you. And we'll talk more about oils. So we want our raw nuts
and soak them. If they have brown skins, it's best to soak the nuts, because those brown skins contain an enzyme inhibitor. An enzyme inhibitor means that it's also going to interfere with digestion, so you feel heavier, takes longer to digest. Also, that chemical that's the enzyme inhibitor in the brown nut has a bitter flavor. And so when you soak that nut, and the enzyme inhibitor chemical comes out, is leached out into the water, you throw the water away, you'll find that the nut is sweeter. It actually is more flavorful. Now, if you want a crispier nut, then you put it in your dehydrator at a low temperature. Usually overnight is fine. It will dry out. It'll get crispy. It'll be crispier than it was before you soaked it. And it will be more lively. It will be easier to digest, as well as tasting better. And then you can use it in a multitude of different ways. If you want to just soak it and use it the way it is, that's perfectly fine. You can eat wet nuts. You can make pâtés. And you can make milks. Wonderful, wonderful milks. So much better than the milk that you buy in a carton at the grocery store, that may or may not be organic, and more than likely has fillers and sometimes sugars like agave in them. So you can make your own milks so easy. You soak the nuts, you put them in the blender with some water, you blend it, and if it's an almond, you will pour it through a bag, a mesh bag, and just squeeze out the pulp. Keep the pulp, because it's good to use in other things, and you drink this beautiful white milk. Kids love it. If you want to sweeten it, you could put a drop of stevia in it, or if you don't have any kind of a health challenge, maybe one date in a whole quart of milk. I have recipes in all my books for almond milk and different kinds of milks, because they're standards in this business. I remember one class that I taught, there was a gentleman that came up to me immediately after Fundamentals of Raw Living Foods. Which, by the way, we have a raffle for that, don't we? We have a raffle for Fundamentals, which is our first all-day class. And those of you who are online, you can enter the raffle by just sending, how do they do that?
Send an email to info@rawfoodchef.com. That's our website, rawfoodchef.com, and say Total Health Raffle, and give your name and phone number, and we'll enter you into the raffle also. And we'll be giving away, as Cherie said, Fundamentals, which is our first one-day class. It's a $375 value, and it'll get you started on your raw food journey.
And those of you who are here, you can just fill out a raffle ticket before you leave. So anyway, this gentleman came up to me after I had done this basic recipe demonstration on granola and almond milk, and he said, "This is going to make all the difference for me, because I didn't know what I could have for breakfast." Just having a fruit or a green smoothie wasn't going to satisfy him. He needed something, hearty. And he was used to having some kind of cereal with milk. And something as simple as that you could show other people, that you could offer to your children, can just change everything for them to get started on this path. So I don't know how I got off on this. Oh, yeah, nuts. Nuts. We're not nut phobic. We do include nuts and seeds in our diet. And one of the things Dan was saying when he first met me, I was giving out cheese. I was the cheese lady, because I came up with these recipes for fermented nut and seed cheeses that were so amazing that when people would taste it, they would say, "Oh, I can definitely give up dairy if I can eat this," because it is so good. It really does taste like cheese, or maybe even better than cheese. And every kind of nut or seed creates a different flavor of cheese. Super easy to make and really delicious. And when it's fermented, it's easier to digest. And of course, you don't eat a lot of it. It's a kind of a celebration food, not something that you eat every day. But definitely it's nice to know, and when you're entertaining, to be able to provide foods like this to people really helps to, it's like the right bait to bring them in.
Yeah, and cheeses are just delicious and provide a base for all sorts of great foods.
How many of you consider yourself, at least if not actively, but recovering maybe, cheeseaholic? I'm way up there with you because that was the thing that kept me from becoming a vegan for so many years.
Anybody found a vegan cheese they like?
Cheese. Yeah.
Most vegan cheeses are pretty challenging, but the raw vegan cheeses, one of the nice things about raw foods that should be pretty obvious but isn't necessarily is when we make raw foods, we're starting out with ingredients that taste delicious. If we're making a cheese out of almonds or cashews or macadamia nuts, how many people like those? Aren't they good? If you're making a regular pastry, you're starting out with flour. How many people would just eat flour? We're taught in school, in kindergarten, we take flour and water and we mix it up, and what do we end up with? Paste.
And some kids eat it, but now
but it's not nutrition.
Delicious, and it certainly isn't nutritious.
Yeah, and so we start out with paste, and then what's the next thing that happens when we do foods in a traditional cooked diet is we take the paste and we add some salt, maybe a little egg, and then we put make strings out of it and boil it, and then we have pasta. Yep, and
still doesn't have any nutrition.
We didn't have much nutrition, did we?
Not by itself.
And then we'll take it another level and we'll add some sugar and we'll add some baking soda or baking powder and we'll stick it in the oven. And then we have pastries and bread. And did we add any nutrition? No. But
what we have done is we've created something that we really want to stay away from, and that is inflammation. And that's why Dan and I both went gluten-free several years ago. We didn't do it because we knew that he had allergies. We didn't really even think about that. He had had allergies his whole life. They weren't as bad when he went raw, but, he still had them when, certain times of the summer when we would leave the coast and we'd go someplace where there was a lot of pollen. But we decided to go gluten-free because there were so many people coming to the school that were gluten challenged. And we thought we wanted to know what it felt like to not have any gluten in the diet at all. Because sometimes we go out to dinner, we have a salad and some bread. Now, I knew that if I did that, if we were traveling and if I had bread 2 or 3 days in a row, my joints got stiff. And I had stiff joints when I was in my 30s before I went on a raw food diet. I was a vegan, but I could eat bread. And I had stiff joints, and I thought, I'm getting arthritis like all my relatives. Then when I went all raw and I wasn't eating bread at all, it went away. And I just didn't put it all together. I just thought because I was really raw that I wasn't having the joint problems. But every time I added bread to the equation, they'd come back again. Just kind of painful joints, stiff wrists. How many of you are experiencing that? It's pretty common. But there's a ton of different kinds of symptoms that people tell us about when they come to the school and they can't have any gluten. So we tried it. We went gluten-free. It was like summertime, and we said, well, let's go gluten-free just till the end of the year and see what that's like. So we did. And just a couple months after we did it, we went to Harbin Hot Springs, where Dan was always hit hard with allergies. Not a sniffle. After only 2 months or less, not a sniffle. That was so unusual, and there was just as much pollen as ever. So anyway, long story short, we stayed gluten-free, and it's now been probably at least 3 years. And we took off all gluten from our program. We don't use namashoyu at the school. We use unpasteurized, wheat-free tamari. We had kamut scones. We got rid of the kamut because even though it's an ancient grain, it still has gluten. And we took it off of our cafe list as well, so that now when people come to our cafe in our school, they know that not only are we 100% organic, which means also GMO-free. That's been a commitment since day one. But we're also now completely gluten-free. And people don't have to read the labels or worry about it. They just know, they can trust that they can come safely. So I got off track again, did I?
We did. Where are we? We're still back on raw
it's all
foods.
Good stuff.
And making it easy, eating this variety. One of the other things we add in our diet is fermented foods. We love cabbage. Cabbage is full of great probiotics, along with the cheeses Cherie talked about, which are fermented cheeses that add to our probiotics. Because probiotics, which are important for our gut, as was also talked about this weekend, are easy to add in that way. And we tend to, if we've taken any type of antibiotics, even chlorinated water, these are all things that are meant to kill bacteria. And they work really well. They kill the bad bacteria, but they also kill any good bacteria that's important to our body. So it's important that we repopulate that. So if you've had antibiotic treatments, it's important that you take probiotics to repopulate that. So having fermented foods on a regular basis is a good addition that we like to have in our diet, and it adds a lot of variety. And they're very easy to make, and they're very, very inexpensive.
Yeah, and as was said earlier, if you have candida or any kind of yeast overgrowth problem, you probably don't want to add that to your diet, although there are some people who advocate a high probiotic diet, including sauerkraut and yogurt, coconut yogurt and that sort of thing made with probiotics, if you do have it. So there's some controversy. You kind of have to see for yourself what works for you. But we don't have cheese every day. That's a special food because it is so high in fat. But we do eat sauerkraut every day. And I'm a big believer in sauerkraut. And all my books have great recipes for different kinds of sauerkrauts. And our students make it at the school, and we serve it on our salad bar at our cafe.
And you can have green sauerkraut and yellow sauerkraut and red cabbage sauerkraut. So you can get also some of the different colors of the rainbow in as part of having your sauerkraut. So that's another addition. Another thing that happens when you're eating a high raw diet is you're also getting a lot of liquids. A lot of the foods, as we've heard about, are full of liquids. And that's good because, as Brian said, a major cause of a lot of disease is dehydration. So a high raw diet is also a diet full of liquids and a lot of water content, unless you're doing a lot of dehydrated foods. If you're eating dehydrated crackers and dehydrated kale chips, which are good, they're fun to add to your diet, but they shouldn't be the mainstream also, but they add that crunch and that flavor and things that add versatility and diversity to your diet. We like those crunchy things. So it's not all about just bland food. That's one of the things we want to get across is, Cherie's famous for big, bold flavors. We make things that are really delicious and really flavorful.
Yeah, and when it comes to dehydrated foods, make sure if you are eating dehydrated foods that you're taking plenty of liquids because, you don't want to get dehydrated. And that's one of the benefits, as Dan said, of a raw living diet is that you're eating a lot of high water content foods. We don't always remember to drink. I don't know how many of you are sitting there with a glass of or a bottle of water, sipping water, but it should be something that you're doing on a fairly regular basis if you're not sipping on juice. And you didn't have a gigantic salad or something really juicy for lunch. So make sure that you're getting plenty of liquids because that's something that's underplayed when it comes to anti-aging science is hydration. Really, really important. You don't want to shrivel up. You don't want to be a prune. You want to have plump skin, plump cells, and everything needs to flow. We're mostly fluids, so we don't want to slow things up and get congestion. That also causes difficulty in elimination. You want to eliminate easily. I'm going to go ahead and talk about urine. Your urine shouldn't smell. People think urine smells. It shouldn't smell. It should be almost clear, hardly any color at all, and it should not smell. So if you're not drinking enough, well, unless you eat asparagus, then you're going to smell it right away. As long as everything's moving the way it should be, you'll smell it right away the first time you urinate. But if you do notice a smell, that means you're not drinking enough. And also, one of the benefits of eating this way is you can go into a restroom and you don't smell it up. And that's really nice, too. I go into a public restroom and I think, boy, am I glad I don't eat meat, because it's not pleasant. And also, again, making sure that you drink plenty of fluids just helps keep things moving. And it's like a daily detox. You should be going to the bathroom often. One of the problems that my stepmother has had her entire life, and she has been plagued with migraine headaches and arthritis and all these diseases, she doesn't like to drink water. And she also likes to eat cookies and drink milk. But anyway, she doesn't like to have to go to the bathroom. It's too much trouble. They actually make drugs now. Anna Marie was showing us some of these prescription medications. They actually have a prescription medication that enables you to shop longer without having to use a public restroom, because it keeps you from having to urinate. And it can cause suicide and all these,
But you don't have to use the restroom.
What a world we're living in. This weekend we heard a lot of really scary stuff, but I hope what this has done was this has motivated people to make some changes in their lifestyle, if not for themselves, for the planet, for the animals, for the children. Because it is very motivating to see what's happening and to understand why we need to make the changes that we're making. And hopefully Dan and I will make it easy for you. You can see that even if you're a busy person, like we are, you're probably not busier than we are. We have 40 employees. We run 44 businesses. We travel. We write books. We do interviews. We're pretty busy. And we manage to do this. So it can be done. And now, it may not be that you're going to do it overnight. It was a transition for us. But you can get started by making sure that you're eating all the colors of the rainbow every day, that you're eating a nice big salad every day with lots of high water content food. We don't have any health challenges, so we have a green smoothie every morning. We put all the colors of the rainbow in our green smoothie. And a few superfoods. Should we talk about superfoods?
Yeah, we love that. Along with adding our colors of the rainbow, which typically we get from our fruits, our berries, which, as Anna Marie said, berries are typically, if you're going to have fruits, they're quite optimal.
Strawberries and blueberries, which are definitely superfoods, and you like that dark color.
Raspberries, blackberries, peaches, mangoes, depending on where we're at, papaya, a variety of those, and orange, banana. And that creates a base, and then lots of greens. And one of the good things about when you're making green smoothies is vary your greens, whether it's kale one day, it could be collards. If you got a clean organic yard, you could go out and pick dandelion leaves. Those are good. They're
spinach,
wild.
Parsley, anything green. And it's just what you don't want is to have the same greens every day. You want to mix it up. Yeah.
Bananas and fruits. Leafy greens go with everything. One of the nice things, if you're going to worry about food combining, one of the simplest rules is leafy greens, which they're kind of in a category of their own. They'll go with everything.
It's not a vegetable. You're not putting vegetables and fruits together. Leafy greens are a category of their own. They're leaves. So I wouldn't be putting carrots in or beets in, but I would put leafy greens in.
And I also wouldn't put in nuts and avocados, because fats and sugars are also a problem. But leafy greens and fruits, if you're eating fruit, if you're not challenged with cancer or something major that you're abstaining from fruits, are a really good combination.
And if you are, have a green juice instead, or a green smoothie without fruit. Or as Dr. Clement said earlier, you could have apples or pears with your greens. So that would be another option, because that's not a sweet fruit, and you wouldn't have anything sweet like a banana in it.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Orange, yes. Oranges, the question is, can we put oranges in? One of the nice things is that we teach at Living Light has to do with flavor balancing. It has to do with, the sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and the fact that you balance them all out. And what happens is when you're making a smoothie and you have a citrus like an orange and you have your sweet fruits, you can pile a lot of bitter greens in. This is why you can load a Vitamix or one of those big Omega blenders like somebody was lucky enough to take home with them. You can pack that with kale and it still tastes delicious. You basically don't even taste the greens because it's in balance. So part of what we teach at Living Light all the way around, whether it's making a smoothie or making a soup or making a salad dressing or making an entree, is how do you create balance of the flavors? And that's one of the secrets to making it taste really good.
That's right. It's to understand flavor balancing, you just have to understand that there are 4 basic flavors: sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. And you basically are going for kind of the opposite of each one to be able to create a balance. So all of the greens, all of the family of green leaves are bitter, some more bitter than others. Romaine is not as bitter as kale. The darker leafy, tougher greens are usually more bitter. And so to bring balance to that, to make it more tasty, you add something sweet and something sour. And that's why dressings, you make a salad dressing, it's usually a sweet and sour. It's usually something, most people use vinegar. We use different kinds of acidic fruits. People will use some sugar in a dressing. We don't use sugar, but we might use one sweet acidic fruit, like a little orange juice or pineapple or something like that. So you've got sweet and sour. That mellows out the flavor of the bitter. That's the whole purpose of a dressing, is to mellow out the flavor of the bitter greens. And this is true with everything. You want to create a balance. So understanding those flavors and understanding how to create that balance will just enable you to make foods that really taste good to you. We all have different palates. And you might try a recipe and the author of the recipe thought it was fabulous, and you make it and you don't think it's so fabulous. But if you can pinpoint it's too bitter or too salty or too sweet or too sour or too pungent, that's another flavor combination of like onion and garlic and ginger and those kinds of more bold flavors, then you can then add its opposite component and bring balance to it and create the flavor that you like best. And that's one of the things that we teach people at Living Light, is how to create those wonderful flavors that suit your palate. And also, what is the average American palate? Where would the flavor kind of profile be if you were pleasing other people? Because you might like things really salty or you might like things really spicy, but other people have a particular, there's kind of a 75% of the population is here. So you kind of learn that as well. But starting out with a smoothie in the morning, a green smoothie, this is what Dan and I typically do.
And we started to talk about green powders. One of the things we like to do is add a little more spectrum of greens. And we do that. Two of our favorites are these plant-based and sea vegetable-based powders. One is Vita-Mineral Greens by Health Force Nutritional. We put a little bit of that in. It's just a full spectrum of a lot of different greens. They're all plant-based, all very natural, and we know the owners of that company, and also of the other one we really like is called Renew Me from E3.
Renew Me.
And it's from Vision Industries, the makers of E3 Live, which make the frozen blue-green algae, which is another thing we like. And those of you who have been to Hippocrates probably know E3 Live, because Brian is a big supporter of E3 Live blue-green algae. And we typically have blue-green algae in the morning, too. We give it to our students. We even give it to each of our 40 staff. They can go into our cafe and have a shot of blue-green algae every day because it's really such good brain food and high in protein and just, the whole spectrum of minerals as well. So that's part of the greens. And you mentioned, green juice. Green juice is something that we add also. The nice thing about green juice is it's an extract, but when we make smoothies, we're leaving all the fiber in. Fiber is good for us. But we want to get more greens in, and maybe if we just ate all that fiber, we couldn't squeeze quite as much in because we're going to have a big salad a couple times of the day probably also. So a green juice is a way of getting a lot more of that healthy greens in by juicing them. And we love fiber, but we don't necessarily need it in everything. And the green juice makes a nice late morning or early afternoon, pick me up that's really easy to get. It's a good way. We said we want to drink liquids instead of drinking water. We like to also add a green drink as something we have in our diet.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you go to a juice bar, they want to put carrots and beets in your green juice. I really wouldn't do that because it's just way more sugar than you need. I would go with cucumbers and celery. If you want a little bit of sugar, maybe a little bit of apple, a little bit of ginger is really nice. That can help with your digestion. A little bit of lemon because, again, sweet and sour helps to balance out bitter. So if you've got a lot of green leaves in your juice, if you put a little bit of lemon in it, that helps to balance out the bitterness of the greens without having to add a lot of sweetness like carrots and beets. But, we have green juice every day. It's the thing that we probably miss the most when we're traveling because we don't get to have the same quality of green juice necessarily that we do at home. And I have great recipes for juices, green juices, and green smoothies in all of our books, too. Not Angel Foods, because that came later. But in Raw Food Revolution Diet and Raw Food for Smart, Busy People. Raw Food for Dummies.
And we do like sprouts. You've heard quite a little bit about sprouts. Sprouts are the best way to eat if we could all go out to our garden and pick ripe fruit and ripe greens and eat it right out of the garden. We're going to get our most nutrition.
And the younger greens, the younger your greens are, the more tender they are, the better.
Yep, and that's what we get when we have sprouts. And sprouts are really easy to grow and nutritious and can be done anywhere.
And of course, because I came from the Ann Wigmore Living Foods program in the beginning, all of my books teach how to sprout, and we're big believers in sprouts. At our school, on our lunch buffet, and in our salad bar, we always have mountains of sprouts for people, as well as some really delicious prepared foods with, as Dan says, those big, bold flavors. So that when people come from outside the community, even if they don't come to our cafe because they want to eat more raw food, they come because it tastes good. You want to be able to help people to understand that food can be healthy and also taste great. There's no reason why you can't have both.
Well, time's going quickly. Let's talk real quickly about some things not to eat. We've talked about some good things to put in your diet, what we want to make a big part of our diet. There's a few things that if you eliminate from your diet, you'll be really moving along fast. And the very first thing at the top of the list is fried foods. And it's something that a lot of people love, a lot of people are hooked on, but fried foods give us a double whammy. First is they're fried with oils that basically are heated above their threshold. They're almost all rancid, and those are going to cause free radicals. They're going to cause weight gain because they're empty calories. They may be saturated. There's no redeeming value in oils that things are fried in. The second thing that happens is when we take a starchy thing, like what's the favorite thing to fry? Potatoes, right? Potatoes, starch and sugar. When you heat it at a high temperature, you create something called acrylamide. Acrylamide is a carcinogenic substance. So not only are you getting the grease and the oil, you're turning that potato into something that causes cancer. And that happens if you fry it, if you bake it, if you broil it, grill it. Those are all things that anything that's got starch and sugar are creating things that are damaging. So you get hit twice with fried foods.
Yeah, and if you want to age rapidly, just keep eating those French fries because they will age you very, very rapidly. And, of course, as Dan says, cause carcinogenic chemicals to be released into your body. So we really recommend, if you're going to cut out one kind of food, to cut out anything that's fried, anything that has fat in it that's cooked at a high temperature. So that doesn't just mean fried. As he said, that also means baked, broiled, or grilled. And that can be nuts, as he mentioned before, because nuts have oil in them. So roast, you think, oh, I'm roasting them. I'm not, I'm not cooking them in oil. I'm not frying them. But they have fat in them. And so when you roast them, you're cooking them at a high temperature, and then they are also creating free radicals in it's going to create free radicals in your body and also create these dangerous chemicals. So nothing with fat in it or around it needs to be cooked. You can steam your vegetables and you can and your potatoes, and you can put nice sauces on them. You can make some delicious raw sauces, delicious raw combinations of spices, so that you really feel like you're eating flavorful food without having to resort to frying.
Yeah, because when we steam something, we cook something with water, we're keeping the temperature down to 212 degrees. That's all the hotter water can get. And at that temperature, we're not creating these carcinogenic substances. So steaming is good. Oils, another problem with oils is almost all oils are omega-6 oils. Omega-6 oils cause inflammation. And what we want to have in our diet is more omega-3 oils, which are things we get from our leafy greens. We get it from flax. We get it from chia seeds. We can get them somewhat from walnuts. Walnuts have kind of a balance of omega-3s and 6s. And when we get omega-3s from plants and from our nuts and our seeds, our body can convert those into the needed essential fatty acids we have, as long as we don't have an excess of omega-6s. If we have an excess of omega-6s, they compete for this conversion process to what our body needs. So we need to cut out safflower oil, olive oil, basically any corn oil.
Snack foods, processed foods, they're all made with oils that contain omega-6s.
And ideally in a diet we have about an equal ratio of omega-3s and omega-6s. In a standard American diet it can be as high as 15-to-1 of omega-6s because of all the processed foods, all the oil foods. And as we've heard from Dr. Clements and some of the other speakers, cutting way down on oils is really good. You really don't need much for oil. We're not oil phobic if it's the right kind. But omega-3s are good, and a few nuts and seeds are going to get you some good oils also.
Yeah, and you don't have to be fat phobic. It might sound like we are, but we do have avocados and good quality olives, and a few sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds and a few nuts, some nut milk, some cheeses. Just not overindulge in them, because you don't want to have a high-fat diet. It's not about your weight. It's really about your health. So even if you're at a good weight, people say, well, look at you. You don't need to worry about fat. I don't worry about fat. I just don't eat a lot of it because it doesn't make me feel good, and I know it's not good for my health. It's not about fat, getting fat. Although if you stop eating so much fat and you have weight to lose, you will lose it, for sure.
And that's the nice thing about a raw food diet, a plant-based diet, particularly in raw food, is you're eating food that's full of nutrition, but as was talked about the other night with one of the questions, it's got a lot of water content in it, and you've got to eat a lot of it, but it fills you up, and your body gets satisfied because it's being filled with both volume, which is one of the things that tells our stomach and our body that we've had enough to eat, and it's being filled with nutrition. And those two things together cause satiety. It basically satiates our body because our body says, oh, I got nutrition and I'm full. And you can quit eating because the body is now happy, versus that Pringles potato chip or that Ruffles, can't eat, what was a Lay's potato, can't eat just one, right? Because there's no nutrition in it. And they're basically empty calories. And they're full of oils and grease. So staying away from things that are empty calories. Oils are empty calories. Processed foods are empty calories. Flours, sugars.
Sugar,
basically.
Let's talk about sugar, Dan. We've heard a lot about sugar this weekend. And I will admit to you that we are a culinary school. And so, of course, we do need to teach our chefs how to make really awesome desserts. And we do that really well. In fact, we have a whole pastry arts program. And some of our students actually even go out and they prepare raw, amazing upscale raw food desserts for delivery to high-end restaurants, or there's even one of our chefs that have a Just Desserts place that's all raw desserts. It's doing gangbusters. But I have to say to all of my students, desserts are not a food group. It's not something that you indulge in every day. Desserts are for celebration. And it's wonderful to know that you can have a healthier alternative. I'm not going to kid you and say that raw desserts are healthy. If they have sweetener and they have fat, which I don't know of any dessert that doesn't, then it's not healthy, but it's certainly a healthier alternative. And as far as flavor is concerned, it's really hard to compare a really great raw dessert to a great dessert that's cooked. There's really no comparison because the great raw dessert will win every time. It's so much more delicious because you're starting, as Dan said, with great tasting ingredients instead of white flour and white sugar that really don't have any taste. And then you have to bump it all up and you have to work really hard. But we can make tiramisu and mudslide pie and, you know, all these incredible desserts that are a much better alternative, but we need to make sure that we're portioning them well, not serving these giant pieces of cheesecake, you know, but smaller portions, and also having them on, you know, not having them every day, thinking about them in terms of being celebration foods. So, and then the kinds of sugars that you want to choose for your dessert making will depend on many things, but let's say you want the healthiest kind of sweetener possible. It would be the lowest glycemic sugar that you can find. There's a lot of lower glycemic sugars now. The coconut sugars are like 35 on the glycemic index, which is about the same as dates. So it's a little bit more natural. Not that it is raw. Don't kid yourself into thinking that it is. And you use less of it. Don't think desserts have to be ultra sweet. They don't have to be. But of course, as a pastry chef, you'll also consider color and flavor as well as health, because again, you want to have the right bait for the public. But if you're making it for yourself, you definitely can make some wonderful desserts just using coconut milk, coconut water, and young coconut, which is naturally sweet. You don't have to use a lot of excess sugars. So, well, what I'm saying here is reduce the amount of sugar in your diet. And if you're going through a health crisis, eliminate it altogether for a period of time until you have returned to great health. But for maintenance, having some sweeteners for celebration, it works for us. And it works for most people.
And this all creates a balance. As we talk about, you can have some cooked food. You can have some steamed sweet potatoes and beans, legumes.
Quinoa. That's another one of my favorite cooked foods for the winter time is quinoa. And I'll often make a raw sauce to go with it or sprinkle some nutritional yeast on it. I don't think Brian likes nutritional yeast, though, does he? But, sorry.
No.
But I like it. You don't want to overdo it, but, it does have a nice cheesy flavor.
Yep. And so these things, create a spectrum of some really good raw foods, things that are really health promoting. Stay away from a large amount of the non-health promoting raw foods because there are some, as we talked about, the sweets, the desserts, too many nuts. You can have too much oil, so you need to keep that in balance. And then you can have some healthy, some amount of the cooked foods that are steamed and not bad for you, and then stay away from those things that are deep fried and the processed foods and the sugars and, of course, the GMO'd foods. As we stay with as much organic as possible, that the better off we're going to be. And this creates, all by itself. There's no weighing. You don't have to count calories. You don't have to worry about where you're going to get your protein and I'm going to get enough of everything. There are two things that we do recommend on a raw food diet that you take as supplements. And they've both been talked about here already, so we'll just mention them briefly. One is B12, because we don't have in basically any diet a reliable source of B12, so that's important. And the other one, depending on where you live, New York being one of the cases you don't get enough, vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin. Once upon a time, we all lived near the equator. We got lots of sun. We just came back from a month in Costa Rica. We didn't have to worry about vitamin D for the month, even though we typically, if we're out in the sun during midday, we're covered. We have hats because we don't want to get sunburned and cancers, things that are bad for us. But in the early morning and late afternoon, we got plenty of sun also.
We went to the beach at sunrise every morning.
Which is really,
so don't have
really
to
beautiful.
Wear anything to nothing.
Vitamin D and B12. Those are the two things that you need to supplement as long as you're not having any major challenges that are caused by some other imbalance. And the body naturally knows how to take this variety of good nutrition full of these antioxidants. The body will take what it needs. And it's smart enough to know, well, I need a little bit more of this today and a little bit of that. And it'll use it to make the building blocks to restore our health. Because our body, our homeostasis, the way our body wants to be is healthy. And all we have to do is give it the right building blocks. And when you give it the right building blocks, it knows how to be healthy. Your body knows how to heal. And so give it some, of course, exercise. We believe 100% in that. And your thought process, what you think about what you're eating, is also very important. What you think about yourself is also very important. And the fact that as you're eating this way, you're doing amazing things for the planet. So you can feel really good about what you're doing for the world and for the animals and animal suffering. And these are all things that reinforce the lifestyle.
Yeah, there are a lot of things besides food. We're very invested in food, clearly. We write books about food, we have a school, and all of that. But there are other things about lifestyle that are really important. You need to get enough rest. One of the things that I am very clear about is that's so important to me, and that is that I don't eat late at night. I would rather not eat. I would rather skip a meal than eat after, this is going to make you crazy, for me, 6 o'clock at night. That's like my cutoff point. I literally won't be eating if I don't eat by 6 o'clock. And I strive for earlier than that. That's why I only need to sleep 5 or 6 hours a night, because I'm not digesting my food when I'm supposed to be sleeping. Digestion takes work. But if I give myself plenty of time to digest my food before I go to bed, then when I'm sleeping, I am really in a good, deep sleep. I'm not fitful as soon as I go to bed. I haven't been tired all day, but I know, okay, it's bedtime. I go to bed, I go to sleep. I wake up feeling fantastic. And people say to me all the time, but I really love to sleep. Well, I love to sleep too. But once I've had enough rest, you can't pay me to stay in bed. I've got too many great things I want to do with my life than, stay in bed and sleep it away. So what I find is if I eat too much rich food at night, and that even means oil in my dressing. I'd rather have avocado on the side. I can digest avocado really easily. But the oils in my dressing at night just don't work for me as well. I feel more tired when I wake up in the morning. So I really notice, and this is something I recommend that everybody do. Start to listen to your body. Journal. Write down how you felt in the morning, what you ate the night before, even what your emotions are, because different foods can bring up different emotions. And I talk about that. I wrote this book, Raw Food Revolution Diet, with Brenda Davis and Visanto Molina, who are both amazing dietitians. And we came up with some really great programs for people who want to go raw. They want to go raw on the fast track, or they want to go raw slowly. They want to be 100% raw or mostly raw or whatever. And we have a lot of peer-reviewed studies in here about how the raw food diet is will not only help you to survive, but to thrive. And we talk a lot about what the nutrients are that give you, what you need and so forth. We also talk about journaling, and how journaling can really help you to get past your addictions and help you to understand and listen to your body, because we're all different. We all have different triggers, different emotions will make us want to have different foods based on how we celebrated or were rewarded as children. And you just have to get to know yourself and love yourself. And as my sister really began to understand in her journey of this 100-pound weight loss, is realize that she was worth it to, she was deserving of happiness and of health and of making those choices that would not just keep her alive, but give her a whole new life. And we can all have that. We all deserve to have it. And you have to love yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but you have to love yourself enough to do the right thing for you. And that's what it's really all about. And Brian talks about that all the time. Have a love fest with yourself. Look at this amazing body. It is designed in such an incredible way. I injured my thumb one time, and I couldn't move it for the longest time. I got a terrible infection in it. And after I could move it again, I just marveled at the way all I have to do is think, and my hand moves exactly the way I want it. No machine can be created to replicate these incredible, miraculous bodies that we have. Let's appreciate them. Let's honor them. Let's do what we need to do to make them the best that they can be. So
we had 5 minutes. So
okay, good.
So hopefully we've given you some ideas of that this is actually easy. It's not hard. It's not difficult. One time I was asked, "What's the biggest mistake I can make on a raw food diet?" Not getting started. That's it. So get started. Go forward. You can't make mistakes. You can only learn. So we invite you to...
I would say there's one mistake that a lot of people make. They think as long as it's raw, it's healthy. And that ain't necessarily so. In fact, I would rather have steamed kale every day than raw cheesecake every day. Okay? Yeah. Oh, you want to go to the dehydration? Good. Thanks for reminding me about that. Yes. If you have food that has high water content, you need to turn that dehydrator up. I don't care if the recipe says 105 degrees. It's saying that because that's kind of a no-brainer. But if you have something with high water content, let's say you're making a lasagna. I have an amazing lasagna recipe in my book. So if you have a lasagna that's got, it's pretty thick, and it's got a lot of moisture in it because you've got the zucchini and the spinach and the pasta sauce and all that in there. You turn it at 115 degrees, and it's just sitting there sweating. That's a good recipe for bacterial growth. You need to bump it up to like 135 for the first hour. Now, that might sound scary, but that's the air temperature. That's not the temperature of the food. You can touch the food and feel that it's still cool. It takes a long time before it starts to release or evaporate, release moisture, before it gets warm enough to release that moisture. So you've got to bump that temperature up to 125, 135 for at least an hour before you then turn it down. And I say that quite often in my books, especially Raw Food Revolution Diet and Raw Food for Dummies, because it's really important not to create bacterial growth in your food. For one thing, it might be safe enough to eat it right now, but then you can't eat that whole lasagna. You put it in the refrigerator, then you get it out, and you warm it up again in the dehydrator. And now you've got more bacterial growth because you want to have reheated. So now, on the other hand, if you're drying something like nuts, they're high in fat, start it out at 105. That's safe because you know that the dehydrator spikes and ebbs. It goes on and it goes off. And at that 105 is a safe temperature for foods that have fats in them, or for foods that are really thin, like crackers. Or I'll make a dehydrated cheese and I'll spread it on my Teflex or Paraflex sheet very, very thin, and within a few hours it's crisp, and I can just flake it like Parmesan cheese and put it on a Caesar salad or a zucchini pasta or something. Then you want the temperature to be low, because not only is it fat, but it's also thin. So thicker, higher water content, the temperature is higher for a short period of time until it feels like the food is warmer, then you turn it down. Does that help?
Time to stop.
Okay.
So
I see a stop sign.
We have a stop sign. Just a quick reminder, we'll take questions at our booth. Hopefully, I think we'll be on a panel later that we can take some questions on. Don't forget to sign up for our raffle. We have it where our books are sold. You get a free class, Raw Living Foods class. Those on the streaming, watching it live, you can send an email to info@rawfoodchef.com. Send us your name and your phone number. We'll automatically already have your email address. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.